My name is Charles. I'm from Teachers Discovery. Most of you who are in world languages and you probably know who I am. I'm that goofy flying goo guy that does all of those coffee breaks and such. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you here. I'm super excited about this. Caleb Sanders, if you don't know who he is a pretty amazing author, actually. A lot of his books are up on teachersdiscovery.com right now. You've written, let's see, you've written the Show Me challenges and clues. You've written the Easy Mock Trials, Easy Debates, the Prove It books. I feel like I'm missing something. What else did you write? There's like a whole bunch of stuff up there.
Yeah, you said the show me challenges. Yeah, so
Yep,
I
yep.
think you
The Show
got
Me
it.
challenges,
So yeah, bunch of stuff.
and recently now, a lot of these sources have been implemented over into the hybrid units that are currently available on Teachers Discovery as well. So very, very cool. And today you're going to be teaching us all about easy debates, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to leave this to you then. I'll let you take over. And thanks again so much for doing this for us.
Hey, no problem. Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it. So I'm excited to be here. I am a regular teacher. How I got thrust into a role of, like what Chuck said, having all these activity books, was just, it just kind of happened. I had some ideas. I threw them out there. I said, I think they're good ideas. I said to people, what do you think? And then they took off, and it's been great. But currently I still teach. I'm not on any traveling circuit. I don't get paid to go speak. I am just a teacher. In fact, I had to list some of the things that I do. One of my biggest crises this year was my lunchroom duty being changed from Tuesday to Thursday. I couldn't believe the administration did that to me because I lost my lunchroom buddy. And as I did some digging and went into the administration, I found out that it was my brother-in-law, who teaches vocational classes, had me changed, so it could accommodate some of his schedule. So anyway, so lunchroom duty. I currently am a junior class advisor. I'm a prom advisor. I'm a coach. I agonize over Secret Santa every year. I have door duties. I sit in staff meetings. I sometimes serve on the BLT, which is the building leadership team, and sometimes not. I taught in 2 different classes. I have kids in class. In fact, my daughter was in U.S. history this year. She was a junior. I have a daughter in college right now. My biggest claim to fame, though, lately has been I've been the 3-time winner of the door decorating contest at Christmas time. So my twin brother, who's the department head, wanted to overthrow me, and he managed to do that this year. I think he got some sympathy votes, but I was pushed down to third, and I can live with that. Other than that, I don't compete in a lot of stuff at the school because I just don't always have the time. So anyway, that is who you're dealing with today. And I'm giving you, I don't know if it's advice or giving you ideas, but certainly I recognize that the audience I have before me has a ton of experience as well, and a ton of great ideas, and some of them probably better than what I'll throw out here today. So let me tell you kind of how we're gonna approach this. I'm gonna actually share my screen. This is let's see here. Okay, so this is easy debates, and my objective is just to make easy debates simple. I don't want it to be complex. I want it to be easy for people to enter into. So that's my main objective with this. And I'm hoping to answer questions at the end. I'm gonna go through how to create an easy debate and introduce it and carry it out to your classes. So first of all, I, even in my, this is around my 20th year of teaching, 19th, 20th year of teaching. And even now, sometimes, even though I do what I'm supposed to do, I try and align my curriculum. I try and make it so it fits standards. I want things to be clear to students. I do all those things. But even now, I'm discontent sometimes with what I do, and I want to make it better for kids. And I remember when I first started teaching, it's like, what do I do? How do I teach this specific content? Um, I'm going to give you an example, kind of what it was like for me early on with the debate and why I got going with the debate. So let's pretend that you want to have a debate in your classroom. You want to argue some points. And when I use the term argue, I'm using it more of a skill. Argumentation is a skill, not a heated thing here. So, but I knew I wanted kids to be able to talk and discuss and argue, debate. And so let's say I'm going to do that with a unit. And let's say that let's pretend I'm teaching world history and it's medieval ages, Middle Ages. And we're getting to the Black Death. And I know nothing about the Black Death. In fact, I might be in my first, second, third year. I hardly know anything about the Middle Ages or whatever my content is, but I want to have a meaningful experience for the kids I teach. So I might throw out a question that we're going to debate. And the question could be, which epidemic had a bigger impact, Black Death or Spanish flu? Now, I'm not going to throw COVID into this right now, but let's say that's my question. And I don't know much about either one, and I'm the teacher. But here I am throwing this out to my students. So what do I do then with that? And essentially, I'm starting the unit that way. I mean, I know I want to have a unit that really goes into this because it's relevant based on COVID. I want to teach about this time period, the Middle Ages. I see the potential in this unit, and I want to start this unit with a bang. So let's try debating that with that question. So I approach the kids. I say, hey, we're going to have a debate. This is what we're going to debate. We're going to debate which epidemic had a bigger impact, Black Death or Spanish flu. And I'm just going to say to the kids, I don't even know what impact means. I'm going to let you guys decide what that word means when you're debating this, but that's what we're going to argue. And if this is your classroom's first debate, you've never done one before, it might be a good idea to talk about the importance of argumentation, because with so much differences of opinion in the world today and so much conflict in the political arena or whatever it is, I think it's important that the kids see that there is some value to argumentation, especially when it's done right. So I might say, hey, what do you think? Why do you think it's important to argue? I'm going to throw that out to you guys for a second. If I don't get any responses, that's totally fine, but I'm curious to know what you might say on that. Why do you guys, anybody brave enough, feel it's important to have argumentation in class?
It allows the kids to see different points of view.
Okay, thanks, Ralph. Good.
Also,
Any other?
students. Sorry,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Shirley.
I was going to say, students have something to say, and sometimes they just need a platform, and they need teachers to have like a type of organization to where they can say what they want to say. So.
I like that. That's well said, because they do. Students have a lot to say, and they need to be involved, and they can teach through that method, and they need that platform. I like how you said it needs to be organized. So, and that's what I hope that when I created Easy Debates, and I hesitate to even say created, I don't necessarily think I've created anything unique. It's just organized it in a way that hopefully is helpful. So good. And then I might even ask the students, what are the limitations or problems that come with argumentation? And, I hope to hear from them some ideas on that. I'm not going to throw that out to you guys for a second. What are some of the limitations that come when you debate something in class? Does anybody have a comment on that?
Kids get angry, for one.
They can get angry. They can get their emotions heated. Good. Any other limitations?
Yeah, normally they're parroting their parents' viewpoints at this time.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. They've got some built-in bias that comes with them, and that can be a limitation. Good. So I think it's important when you first do this, and maybe even the first several times you have a debate, that you spend a moment and just talk about some of these issues that could come up, and it helps put people at ease. that, hey, it's okay to have disagreements. It's okay to do this. So, okay, so we're going to go ahead and so you've introduced the question. So on our example right now, the question is, we're going to go ahead and make sure we're muting in the chat. So, okay, so go ahead and make sure. Let's see here. All right, guys, I'm just going to go ahead and go back to my chat, make sure we're muted, or Chuck can do that. Okay, so once I introduce the question and once we talk about, hey, we're going to debate this question, which epidemic had a bigger impact? You know, was it the Spanish flu? Was it the Black Death? And I might ask them, what do you guys think impact means? Well, once we do that, then we're going to divide into groups. You know, I'm going to have a group that's supportive of the Black Death. I'm going to have a group that's supportive of the Spanish flu. Now, the relevance in this is it's not so important that we rank one epidemic above another. What's important is that we argue, we debate, we learn that way. We learn about these epidemics, and it spurs further conversation, which you can attach later even to COVID-19 issues. So what I've started doing with my debates recently is I'll just give them some time to research it. Now I have the luxury, obviously, for me, of having iPads per student, one per student, and we have access to the internet. I know that that's not the case with everyone, but it's becoming more and more frequent. So it's easy for me to just say, hey, you guys, you're going to go out, you're going to look, you're going to get on the internet and start researching Spanish flu and Black Death. And, you know, in 5 minutes, they may know more about it than I do at that point. It really depends on my years of experience in teaching. And then after a few minutes of that, I'm going to say, okay, you know, maybe you've got an opinion, maybe you got some ideas. We're going to divide into groups. The way I divide them into groups that has been beneficial for me, and I know there's multiple ways to divide them into groups, there's not one way better than others. I just have them put on a little sticky note, or they can digitally send it to me what they want to argue. And if they're like, I don't know, or it doesn't matter, I love that. Put that down. I don't know, it doesn't matter. So, and I can take that. So, and then, in fact, I like that because it allows me to kind of divide the groups evenly. Once they give me those sticky notes, or once they send it to me digitally, I can make the groups fairly balanced. And I remind them, hey, you may not get a group that you want to argue, but that's okay, because you're going to get to see other viewpoints and maybe develop some viewpoints that maybe weren't originally your own. And I doubt the kids are going to have much on this specific debate, the epidemic one. I doubt that most are going to have a background in that, especially if it's their first or second year of world history. Now, some debates lend themselves to other groups, several groups, and we can get to some of those debate questions later. So, but for the sake of this specific debate in my example, you're going to have two groups. And I just talked about how will I determine who goes in what group. Now, if this is your first time doing a debate and you're not comfortable scoring a debate, you can have some of the kids be judges. Maybe you have 10 kids in your class who are going to argue for the Spanish flu. Maybe you have 10 kids in your class going to argue for the Black Death. And maybe you can select 10 kids to be judges with you, where it's basically a vote by essentially a jury that decides who wins the debate. Now, I do most of my debates, I do have a group that wins, but you can have healthy debates without that as well. But I'm going to talk as if there's going to be a winning group. So once I've determined who's going to be in what group, and that I have judges, then I show the kids this. Hey, class, this is the sequence, especially since if it's their first debate. So I'm going to say, hey, before the debate, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have some individual prep time. I'm going to give you guys maybe just 20 minutes. When we don't have a lot of time, I'm going to give you 20 minutes to prep for this debate, where you're going to research. Now, if you don't have access to the internet, you'll have to do a little more prep time ahead of time, maybe finding some articles, printing those off, making sure kids have some sources to go to. But like I say, the luxury I have is I have, iPads per student with great internet access. So I'm going to give them individual prep time. A lot of times 20 minutes. Sometimes I give them a couple days. It depends on really what I'm looking for in this debate, if we really want to go into it in depth. But for the sake of, hey, we're just going to use this to introduce a unit on this time period of the Black Death, then I'm just going to give you 20 minutes. And then I'm going to have them do group time, probably about 5 or 10 minutes where they're with their group. They're just sharing ideas on how they want to approach this debate. Now, a question I would have is if there's judges. So if you've got a group of 10 kids, what do they do? 10 kids who are judges, what do they do while everyone else is preparing for this debate? Well, I'm going to have questions that I've designed ahead of time that I want them to answer. Now, this could be tough, especially if I'm a first-year teacher, second-year teacher. I don't know anything hardly about this unit that I'm diving into, but I think it's an important unit. Then I could use these questions. I could have the judges answer, what is bias? What are your potential biases as a person? How does a person avoid bias and judge fairly? What does it mean to be objective? And what makes a good source for information in an argument? What is the difference between primary and secondary sources? So I'm just giving this for the judges to think, because it's important that these judges do it in an objective way, that they judge without biases. Like, they're not going to go against someone who treated them bad in second grade, or they're not going to vote against or vote for their best friend or whatever. It's important to get them thinking about this. So this might be a good idea. Some questions that will actually fill their time that I think can be beneficial, because you might have a discussion about some of these things later on after the debate is done. So currently right now, with a lot of, I just did a debate a few weeks ago. I took about 10 minutes of my prep time and made some questions, because it was a new debate, where it wasn't a new debate, but I didn't use judges before for the debate, and I needed them to have some questions. So I prepared some of those. And if we have time, we can look at those later. Okay, so let's see here where we're at. Hey, there I am. There's me. Okay, so let's go back for a second. Let's go back to this. So the sequence, I said to the students, hey, listen, we're going to debate this question. The question, once again, is which epidemic had a bigger impact? Was it the Spanish flu? Was it the Black Death? And you're going to have 20 minutes of prep time, and then you're going to have some group prep time. After that prep time's done, we're going to start the debate. Now, I know you guys have never debated in class before. And in fact, this is my first debate as a teacher in class, but this is the way we're going to approach it. When we actually debate, I'm going to give you some time for opening arguments. I don't think there's a magical number on this. I've done opening arguments that have been 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It really just depends. I generally stick between 3 to 5 minutes on something that we just don't know a lot about. And each side is going to get that 3 to 5 minutes. I'm going to hear from the Spanish flu side. I'm going to hear from the Black Death side. And then we're going to have a break after I hear from them. And that break is designed to give them a chance to research some more and dive into it more with their group, because by now you got the cogs and wheels going, they're oiled. They're going to want to have some time to kind of process what was said. After that, they're going to have a chance to rebuttal or just secondary arguments. Hey, it's a chance to get up and argue again and share more thoughts that you've come across. And generally they have a lot of thoughts they've come across, and they'll do that. And I'll probably do that for 3, 4, 5 minutes. Sometimes I ask the kids, hey, what do you want? You want 4 minutes? I want to make it equal for both sides. So do you guys agree? 4 or 5 minutes? And so we go with that. I generally use a timer. I stick to the timer because I want the kids to know that this is organized, that there is someone who's keeping this debate in check and flowing the way it should be. And you could go back and forth like this several times. I only do it twice. I have the opening argument, then maybe a secondary or a chance to argue again. And then I want to have a Q&A session. That's important to me. It's important that I get a chance to ask questions as their teacher, but it's important that the judges who have been listening, hopefully listening, get a chance to ask questions. Now, when I first started doing debates, I'm like, I don't know what to ask. I'm so busy trying to score this if I don't have any judges helping me, or I just didn't really know. So a lot of times in debates, I've made some pre-questions, some questions ahead of time, and I know in the books, the activity books that have been written, and some of the hybrid units, those are there. So you have those questions. In fact, I give those questions, the questions that kids might get in the Q&A, I give those to the kids ahead of time now when they're doing some prep. And that way they're not blindsided by some of the questions, because some of the questions are actually pretty difficult. But if I got judges, they might think of something and they might throw out a question. Now, I actually have the kids come to the front of the classroom to answer the questions. I don't know if that's important or not. I think you can have them maybe stand up where they're at or even sit where they're at. It depends on the kid. Maybe they might be shy or quiet, but what I also do is I make sure that I never call on a kid by themselves. The intention is not to embarrass, and I'll let students know my intention is not to embarrass you. This question might be tough. If you don't have any thoughts, that's okay, but do your best. See what you come up with. And like I say, generally it's 2 or 3 students that I have on that. So, and by the way, I know that there's things going on in the chat, and I'll look at the chat here in a second. And I know Chuck's going to fill me in on the chat probably later on if I don't get to some of that. I know he's involved in that as well.
You're good, Caleb. It's Mary Momini. Hey, I'm watching it. You're
okay.
good.
Okay, sounds good. Appreciate that, Mary. So you have this Q&A. There's no magical number. I generally ask about 4 to 5 questions for each side. So you have a Q&A that's about 10 questions. You can certainly ask more. These debates can go, I'm dealing with about 60-minute class periods. These debates can go a couple days. I can shorten them to 1 class period. I can say, hey, this is going pretty good. Let's add a few more questions in. I mean, it's flexible. I don't think there's a magical number out there. After the Q&A, then we do closing arguments. I just say, kids, it's your last chance to convince me and the judges of what you've come up with. And I'll give them probably 3-4 minutes to just share some thoughts, hopefully new thoughts that they've come across, and they usually do. And that's the sequence. Once again, I share this sequence ahead of time. I let them see it, especially if it's their first couple of debates. And I want to emphasize once again, if this is your first time, this is awesome. It's like, once again, I don't know anything about this question that I've chosen about epidemics, but we're wanting to teach about it. I'm learning about it. I'm scrambling. It's my first year. I'm going to throw out this debate question and see how it goes, and I'm going to judge it. And it works great. Now, when you talk with your judges, you can do it multiple ways. You can talk with your judges. You can take them out in the hall and discuss it. You can go off in the corner of your classroom if you've got a sizable classroom. You don't have to discuss with your judges. They can just do a secret ballot and say, this is who we think won. I like talking with the judges a little bit and seeing why they might decide the way they did. So we have something to give to the teams, to the groups. Say, hey, this is what we're thinking, or this is what the judges were thinking. I'm not going to tell you who thought this. I'm just going to let you know this is some of the discussion we as judges had and what went into basically our verdict, our decision on who won this debate. Now, I have the word incentive off here to the side. A lot of times these debates, an incentive is going to be awesome. Whatever your incentive is, if it's a class, if it's a pizza lunch, If it's my most common incentive, most of my debates now these days are tied to an assessment, a unit assessment. In fact, usually the debate is the essay question on a unit assessment. And if I have a team that wins and they win pretty handily, easily, they've convinced me, or they've proven to me that they can, and that they've answered that question that goes on a unit assessment. Now, I don't get a grade their writing, obviously, but that's the essay question. I'm going to give them 100% or whatever percentage. I'm not, this webinar is not specifically designed to go into grading techniques, but I'm just letting you know kind of what I do. The losing side, it's like, hey, you guys did awesome. You lost by a few points. You're going to get a chance to redeem yourself a little bit. You're going to have to write an essay question on this, on the unit assessment. But I tell you what, they do great. After you debate something in this format, it's generally not too difficult to be able to write about it in an essay. On an assessment, even if that assessment comes 3 or 4 weeks down the road, it's amazing what they retain from argumentation, from debate. I know that other people have all sorts of incentive ideas and things they do, but that's kind of the motivation I use in this debate. Once again, it doesn't even have to have an incentive. It's you're learning and you're having a great activity and it's going well. The debrief part is one of the most important or favorite parts for me. I think it's important after the debate to debrief, to talk about what went well, what didn't, what are some things they learned, what are some things they would do differently in the debate. We talk about bias. Hey, you argued a specific side. You've kind of built up this bias now towards that. How do you approach this objectively, especially if it's a really important question? How do you be objective about this going forward? And we have some really good discussions with that. And in the books, the activity books, I give some debriefing ideas. So I'm holding up, this one's easy debates for economics class. There's debriefing ideas for each of the debates that are supplied in here. And you can do your own debriefing activities. You can choose to grade the debriefing. It's really up to you. So that is the basic format of easy debates. Now there's a ton, especially we're going to go into more today, but tomorrow we're going to focus really on alternatives to just the easy debate format, because there's lots of different approaches you can take to argumentation. And like I say, tomorrow is reserved for that. There's some really good ideas that I've come across that other people have shared with me on how to make it, especially if you debate a lot. I mean, in my US history class for juniors, we debate 10 to 12 times a year, almost every unit. Essentially every unit we debate, and I don't want it to be the same format all the time. So we'll do something different, and that's, like I say, that's tomorrow's session. Before I go forward with some more things on easy debates, I just want to pause and answer some questions, maybe a couple questions right now before moving on. And I think what we'll do is I'll look, Mary, maybe you could fill me in on some of the questions from the chat, if there's any that you'd like me to answer.
They all are really excited about this PowerPoint and want you to share it with Chuck or myself so that we can send it out to all the attendees. So that's really cool.
Cool. All right, sounds good.
They also were curious about which easy debates you have. So I don't know if you want me to chat about that. I've worked with Caleb a lot on these resources, so I feel like I know them pretty well too, but you're the expert. So if you want to share which ones you have available and you know, where they're located, that would be cool too.
Okay, cool. And yeah, and then you can fill me in. First of all, I know that, so Teacher Discovery just released a lot of hybrid units. And I know a lot of the hybrid units, almost all of them, have easy debates or have a debate format attached to them as one of the activities, one of the ideas. So I think that's great because, you know, you can, in US history, world history, or whatever class it is, you may not get through all the curriculum. there's certainly history lends itself well to teaching maybe different topics. Um, and you can select, and most of those topics in the hybrid units are going to have easy debates. So I held up the economics one. So there's an easy debates for economics, which I had to use my brother a lot as a resource. My twin, he teaches economics. There's easy debates for world history. And I used to teach world history. I don't right now. I'm going to have to talk to my administration about that. There's world geography, easy debates. I currently do teach that. By the way, that's my phone in the background. I'm not answering it, so it'll ring until they get tired of me not answering it. There's easy debates for government. And finally, there's easy debates for American history, United States history. Mary, is there anything else you want to say on that?
I just wanted to add, I don't know if any of you have heard about the thematic hybrid units, but a ton of Caleb's work appears in those. And the difference between the books that he just held up and the thematic hybrid units is that for anyone teaching remotely or in hybrid situations, all of his debates, all of the handouts, the templates, the grading rubric, if you pick it up in a hybrid unit, it's all editable. So you can type and actually grade it while you're doing it live through Zoom, and your kids, your students can be typing into it and then submit it through Google or Canvas or whatever platform your district goes through. So that's something kind of cool that we just did recently. And then also that the books that he held up are available as PDFs to download as well. I think that's it from me.
Okay. What those books do they just give a bunch of different debate questions. Well, it gives the format, and it gives a little more specifics. There's actually some things I'm going to introduce you to in just a second that aren't actually in the book that I just added maybe in the last year. But it's just a resource, and that's what I wanted it to be. Really what I wanted was just, I live in a world that I don't have a lot of time. And probably most of you relate to that. At the beginning of this, I was telling you what I'm involved in. And this last spring was just busy. That's the world I live in. And I want to be a good teacher. I want there to be good activities. I want the kids to have good experiences. And this was just created for that. Hey, can I cut down on prep time and still have awesome experiences where the kids get a chance to share thoughts? And that's what I feel it's been. They've been really awesome. And so, okay, let's move on here now to, I already shared this, questions you give to the judges. So scoring a debate, let's say that you're not going to use judges. Let's say you want to be in control of deciding how this debate goes, who wins and loses. Now, I know there's tons of different ways to score debate. I know there's different ways in speech and debate. There's different ways in whatever competitions are out there in a debate class. For my uneducated purposes, when I first started doing this, I just said, here's how I want to score it. This is what I want to look at. And the first thing was, for every argument they get out, I want to give them a point. And I say legitimate argument, meaning that I just didn't want a list. I didn't want them to throw out lists. In fact, I don't let them use the internet when they're debating. I don't want them reading from sources. They can use notes they've taken, but I don't want this just to be a garbled list. I'm not going to give you a point for that. I want some thought put into it, maybe some of your own words put into that. You're going to have to decide what's legitimate for you. I know what it is for me, and it may be even different from my twin brother. He does debates. He actually has a different format he uses, which is really good. Hopefully he shows up tomorrow and tells us about it. Okay, I give him a point for their answers during the Q&A. Hey, you know what? You put some thought into that answer. It maybe wasn't totally accurate, or it maybe had some holes in it, but I appreciate the thought that you guys put into it, and you're going to get a point for that. Now, I don't tell them right there and then, hey, you guys got a point for that. In fact, I basically keep that secret because I really don't want people to feel bad if they answered a question and I didn't score it. It's up to you on if you do that or not. I think either way is fine. I do deduct points. I don't have this problem now, but when I was a beginning teacher and first started using these easy debates, it's like all of a sudden I had kids interrupting and wanting to share and wanting to pipe in with their thoughts. It's like, oh, what is happening? What's going on? I don't want this. I want this to be organized. So I do deduct points, and I hardly have any point deductions now because they know that I'm serious. If you talk when another group is presenting or sharing their thoughts in a debate, you're going to get dinged for that, because that's not how we do it in this class, in this environment. We're going to listen to other people's points of view. Especially some debates lend themselves to some pretty emotional experiences, and I think it's important that you keep control of that. And if you have a system of scoring like this, it's going to help. The part that I've added that doesn't show up in the activity book is this, and that is, I want to give some bonus points to who I feel had the best sources, because what I'm learning now is sources matter, and where are you getting your information from? And I want them to share that. I want them to share their sources. They might even airplay their sources on a screen. They might say, hey, this is where we got this. And if I feel like you're diving into some things and maybe you're sharing some primary sources mixed in with secondary, I'm going to give you some bonus points because your groups seem to have the best sources. And sometimes it's tough for me. Sometimes I got both groups do really well. Very rarely will I say, hey, nobody gets the bonus points or both groups get the bonus points, because I want to keep this, I want it to be valid, my judgment. I don't want to be just, hey, you guys are both participating, you both did really well. But sometimes I do. Sometimes I say, guys, I can't decide who had the best sources. I really can't. So I'm not going to give points for it. You guys did awesome. And then this, what you see over here on the screen, is the score sheet for debates. It's just an example. There's templates in the activity booklets. I do a lot of typing actually on the computer, on my laptop, to keep up while I'm scoring a debate. So that's how I score it. It works great. If you want to add your own category of scoring or take away something, I say go for it. There's no harm in doing that. You got to do what works best for you. But I promise you, you're going to have good experiences when you do these debates. Okay, we kind of already talked about this. Do kids develop a bias? Yes. Do they favor the side they argued? In many cases, yes. And that's why I want to emphasize, when you debrief after these debates, I think it's important that you talk about the bias that they have. And everyone has bias in everything in life, our background, our culture, our environment. I mean, we could talk a ton about bias, and I think it lends itself to some good discussion with the kids. A lot of times I ask kids, hey, who argued for actually a side that was opposite of how they really felt? And some kids will raise their hand and say, yeah, I actually could have argued for their side. And I say, thank you. Thank you for arguing for a side that really wasn't a side that you were with, but you wanted to dive and expand your portfolio into an area and maybe understand a different point of view. I think you can create a climate of that. Okay, some debate examples. So I know we have a lot of language arts teachers on here, and so I want to give some debate examples for them. And then I'll go back to the social studies realm and give some examples for you guys as well. It's interesting. I dug up, let's see here.
Hey, Caleb.
Yeah.
Before you jump to that, while you're still on the topic of like grading them and having a winner or loser, you just had a question come in that I wanted to let you respond to. They asked if you think the debates go better when there's a winner and a loser, because you talked about scoring it and the value of that. Could you just elaborate a bit?
Yeah. Okay, so I don't use the term loser very often, that someone lost the debate. I mean, I do say your side lost the debate, but I don't use that term often. A lot of times I say, hey, this is the side that convinced me the most or convinced the judges the most. So I avoid those terms. So I'll say, hey, you guys convinced us the most. I mean, both of you are awesome, but I had to pick someone who convinced the most. It was this side right here. But let me talk about what both sides did really well. So I do that. I don't necessarily think you have to have a winning side and a losing side. A lot of kids are going to want to know if you introduced it as, hey, this is a debate, want to see who convinces the most. A lot of kids are going to want to know if they won or lost. And so you can be honest. I use it as feedback. Hey, yeah, you convinced me on a level that was awesome, but it wasn't as good as this side. I mean, you can let them know. It depends on the culture in your classroom. For me, it's important that we have an honest, open environment with positive feedback. I've rarely have a negative experience with that. Maybe more so when I first began with debates, but you can do it just as an activity where you're hearing different points of view and no winner or loser is announced. It's just you're debating it. Hey, because that's what I do. When I go to my family's house on a Sunday evening dinner, no one scores it. No one chalks it up. It's just, hey, we talk. And so you can do that. And I think you're totally fine. In fact, I highly recommend that. So I think that's okay. Mary, is that good? Did I answer the question okay? Yeah. Okay. So let's go to some examples. Unless Mary, there's other questions that you want to.
No, you can go ahead. I think you did great.
Okay. I wished I taught English right now because there's so many. When I first started writing debates, I wrote a few English ones just for fun. And there's one I'm scrolling down to. Man, I don't see it here. Let's see here. Okay, so I don't see the one here, but so I don't know if you're familiar with Ordeal by Check. Go ahead, Mary.
I was just gonna say you may have to share your screen again because at least
Oh, is it not sharing?
frozen. Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. Is that working? Or is it still paused? It's sharing right now?
You're on how to score a debate.
No, that's not what I want.
Oh, sorry.
So, I don't know why. Let me stop sharing and then I'll try and reshare again here. Share screen. I was probably sharing PowerPoint instead of screen. Okay, so here it is. Can you guys see that okay? All right, so there was, I don't know if you're familiar with Ordeal by Check. It's not even a story. What it is you look at a whole bunch of these checks that have been filled out, and it leaves the reader with like filling in the holes of what's the story here on all these checks that have been filled out. So I actually made a debate because, and the debate question was, who was more of a rebel, Lawrence Exter Sr. or Lawrence Exter Jr.? Because these checks are filled out by one of those two people. And you just have to guess on what these checks mean, like actual like checks, writing money checks. And I created questions for the groups on who was arguing what. And I think that we'll have links to those. Chuck or Mary you can clarify that. But I think there'll be links to some of these. Awesome debate. I've never been able to do it, but I might just cheat and do it anyway in one of my classes for fun. Great debate. You can do thematic debates in language arts. You know, what is the main theme of To Kill a Mockingbird? And you can just grab possible themes and you can have these kids argue what theme they think is the main theme coming out, which I think, you know, you guys, you discuss a lot of that in English anyway, or in the language arts. But yeah, this is just me putting it together with some questions that a person can ask. It lends itself well to short stories. So I'm scrolling up actually here. So what is the main theme in To Build a Fire? To Build a Fire was an awesome short story that I read in high school. In fact, one of my favorite classes was American literature in my junior year. And they're just arguing, what's the main theme in To Build a Fire? Is it survival? Is it lack of good judgment? Is it man versus nature? instinct versus intellect, whatever it is, and I break the kids into, so here it's just not two groups. Here you have essentially 4 or 5 groups that you can break the kids into. And these are questions that I might ask during the Q&A, or if I have judges, I might have the judges ask those questions. One of my favorites, I have it printed off, and I know there's a link to it. There's this poem called Abandoned Farmhouse by Ted Kooser. And it's just an awesome poem. And the debate question I have here is, what happened to the abandoned farmhouse? And you can read the poem in 3 to 5 minutes. And I've created some questions that a person can ask in the Q&A on this, but that is just an outstanding debate to get them to dive into poetry and to look and come up with their own conclusions. Like I say, I don't teach in the language arts realm, but I think there's so much you can do. And you can use the Easy Debates format, or whatever, format you come up with that spins off of that. So those are some English examples. No, I don't want that. Any questions that you might have in the English realm, language arts realm? Okay, so let's talk about debate questions in general. So I'm going to go to my speaker view here. And so, I don't know, there's tons of questions. There's questions galore you can ask. You can bring up a character in history. I know that teacher discovery, a few years ago, they came out with hero versus villain kind of approach. Was this person a hero? Were they a villain? You can debate that with any poster set they have, with any character from history they have. And it lends itself well, because what I love about it is you're able to understand that person in history. I've done that with Abraham Lincoln. Actually, I've debated, hey, was this person a hero? Was this person a villain? And a lot of times the kids say, hey, well, it depends on how you define villain, depends on how you define hero. And I say, yeah, exactly. I know. I'm not going to define it for you either. We're just going to decide. We're going to debate it. You define it as part of your arguments. You make a definition for what that word means. You make a definition for what you think epidemic means. You make a definition for what you think corrupt means. And I love that aspect of the debates. I leave it up to them to define it. And some kids do a really good job. Hey, this is how we're going to define this word. And our arguments are going to support our definition of hero or our definition of villain. So like I say, Teacher Discovery has a ton of that series and resources. I know, let's see here. I don't teach economics right now, but I did create some economic debates.
Caleb, would you mind if I shared a couple of the ones? I have them right here in front of me. The ones that I love that you have from the different books.
I would love it.
From econ, and I've actually done, prior to coming to Teachers Discovery, I taught high school everything: world history, economics, government, American history, psych, biology. Yeah, I've used should there be a junk food tax? That was one of the econ ones that the kids got into. And should the minimum wage be increased? That one gets heated. So you got to be ready for that one, because there are opinions to be had. For government, should Congress have term limits? What else? Should the Electoral College be used to decide as part of the presidential election portion? For world history, oh man, you mentioned the one about the epidemics. Was the French Revolution really a success? So that gets pretty fired up too. Or they got really passionate over whether the Greeks or the Romans had a better influence, a greater influence on our world, on Western society specifically, I think is what the debate said. For American history, did Abraham Lincoln really deserve a second term? And should America have dropped atomic bombs in World War II? These are just a couple examples that I've interacted with. Each book has anywhere from like 10 to 15, 17
Yeah,
debates.
17.
For the
Yeah.
geography one, I think the one that was always fun is the one that says, should Europe be a continent? Which really gets them thinking.
I did that a few years ago, actually, because most kids didn't realize that they thought the whole world defined every country in the world says there's 7 continents. I said, no, you know that it depends on where you're at in the world. They define what is really a continent. Some people say there's 6 continents. Some areas of the world, they say 5 continents. So that was really actually an introduction debate to geography that I did a couple years ago. I've done it a couple times. So, sorry, Mary, I didn't mean to interrupt if you had more, but on the topic of geography, I remember one year I wanted to learn about the physical geography of South Asia. And I knew that the Himalayas were a dominant part of that. And I'm like, how am I going to get them involved in this? And we're going to start off with a debate. We're going to debate, did George Mallory actually make it to the top of Mount Everest? And well, how does that get them into the physical geography of South Asia? Well, it starts to get them looking at altitude and acclimatizing to altitude into this, but it brings a human element, an emotional element into this person who died way back in 1924 that they had never heard about. But now all of a sudden they're debating about whether this guy made it to the top of Mount Everest or not. And they're looking at the evidence and they're starting to understand the different camps on Mount Everest. They're starting to understand really the geography of the Himalayas. And then after that, we go into some cultural aspects like the Sherpa people, and we build off of that. So when you start a unit, you can start a unit with a debate. You can do a debate in the middle. You can do a debate towards the end. It's really up to you. Yeah, there's just tons of debate questions out there. Mary, was there anything else on that you wanted me to hit?
Just a quick question that came in. Matthew said, if students get to define certain words, when you mentioned that you let them create their own and learn what that word means to them and define them, wouldn't that create like 2 or 3 debates within one debate? Or is that what you want?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. If both groups define it, then they've equalized each other. Then it's like, well, I'm not going to make that important. Then the definition is in my court. It's how I view it then. So how I view a hero or how the judges view a hero now is the one debate. But if there's one group that's really pushing for their definition and the other group doesn't know what hit them or it doesn't really define it, then the group that's defined it they're well organized in their debate and they're going to get obviously credit for that. But I was worried about that. I think it's a great question because I originally was worried about, well, do I need to define these words for them? Yes and no. I have. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I tell them, you're going to have to define this. And if both groups do a great job with different definitions, then it's just a mute point from that. It becomes my definition.
I just wanted to point out too on the last thing that you said, I thought was really valuable. When I was a first year teacher, I didn't try debates because I was just trying to survive. And I was hired to teach 4 preps in Detroit public schools. And so it was a, learning curve for sure. But I would say in my second year, when I actually started trying debates, I always thought a debate was something you did at the end of a unit, like a pivotal assessment piece. And I think it's really important that you added, because it wasn't until I got a few years under my belt that I realized, oh my gosh, I can totally introduce a lesson, flipped classroom, right? Put it in their corner. I'm not going to teach you anything yet. And we're just going to dig right in. And actually, I think that was really awesome for how well they were invested in the unit from that day forward.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. There's some debates early on where the kids knew more about the topic than I did. And even today, I can know a ton about the topic. And there's a lot of kids that because of the debate, they just know a ton about it as well. You can obviously debate current events. I didn't bring that up because I actually think there's a lot of debatable points out there. There's issues, there's political issues, there's issues in the news, current events, like I said, that lend themselves to debate. But my debates, a lot of them are built upon things that aren't always easy to debate, especially units that, you know, you're stuck in some time period, the roaring 20s, and how is that relevant to a kid 100 years later? Well, you can do that. You can debate. You can come up with some sort of debate question that makes it relevant. I actually use a debate question that doesn't have to do with relevancy. It's just, hey, was the roaring 20s indeed a roar? What does that mean? And we look at that and then we apply it to different eras, historical eras. What makes an era? What gives a historical era a name? And so we spin off of that. Anyway, you can get me going a lot on that. Let's see, other questions. I
By the
haven't
way,
scanned.
By the
Go
way,
ahead.
you guys can totally unmute and ask if you want.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be just us, but I'm just reading one that came in. Stephanie asked if you inform the parents before you do a debate, because she tried one that was in an honors class that went wrong and parents were misinformed on what happened in class. Everything worked out fine, but it actually got up to admin.
Yeah, you know, especially if it's a current event with, if it's a political issue where you're going to have different opinions on an issue, I think that would be wise to do that in your syllabus, in maybe a letter home. Say, hey, we're going to be debating this with the intent of becoming informed on both sides of the issue, to see how other people view an issue and to have a chance to express our viewpoints as well. But yeah, there's certainly some controversial debates that you'll probably want to do that with. And that's where you're going to, ahead of time, you'll definitely want to talk to the kids. Hey, I understand that there are differing points of view on this, and that it's something that we see a lot of in the news right now. But because we value respect in this classroom and we want to hear people's viewpoints, we're going to debate this, but we're going to debate it in a way that gives everyone a chance to express these views. And it's important that, and I tell the kids, it's important that you're attacking points and not people. I don't use the word attack too much, but when you go after something, when you're going to say, like on a rebuttal, it's important that it's the points, not the people. So you might want to spend some time establishing that culture in your classroom.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So, you know, I get the vibe that several of us teach foreign languages. And so a lot of our stuff is cultural. And so my question is, since you've done this a lot more than I have, in the past, like I can definitely see a situation where somebody says something really biased or unintentionally racist or things like that. Like, how have you or would you handle something like that in the moment? Because you want to have a safe classroom for everybody, but at the same time you have to treat it. So I was just wondering if you had any advice on that.
You know, I've had that actually come up this year. Species, I'll just step forward and say, hey, I'm just going to put this on pause for a second because I see a chance to talk about or educate on a particular issue that could be misinterpreted. So this term was used, and I would say this term probably isn't appropriate right now. Or I might just say that term is not appropriate. I don't know if we totally understand that. I might say, hey, I've used terms that I wasn't totally educated on. And I think now is a good time for us to kind of educate each other in this class on what would be an appropriate way to express this point or use this term and what's not appropriate. You know, it really depends. I haven't had to talk to someone about something that happened in a debate later on, but I've been prepared to do that. I've been prepared to take them aside and say, hey, just so you know, that wasn't appropriate. And but I almost think it's better to actually just address it there with everyone, because you don't want anybody to go home with a misconstrued version of, say, hey, Mr. Sanders, let this go. Because I, especially in, you know, today with how we're understanding things, I just wouldn't let it go. I'd educate. Probably not the best advice, but that's what I had to do this year. So far, no nasty emails. Other questions, you can go ahead and unmute and ask other questions. I see someone talked about, oh, go ahead.
Oh, nothing. I was just saying that might be it.
Anyone else have questions? I want to know how your brain works, Caleb. You seriously like amaze me. I don't know how you can make 100 debates and a book of mock trials and 2 books of persuasions, show me challenges, and what else? 3 books of show me challenges. I'm sorry, and 2 books of persuasion stations. He's a really creative guy, so I give him a lot of props because I just don't know how you do it.
Well, it's you got, I don't know how many people are on today. Right now, we got 40 some participants that they probably approach teaching the same way I do. What would I do if I was a student, you know, and you try and remember back when you were a student, how would I approach things? And so teachers have great ideas. So some of them have written them down. Some have just used them in their classroom and they're covering them up, keeping them secret. So, but thanks, Mary, for those kind words. So appreciate it. Thanks everyone for being here today. Tomorrow we'll look at different ways to do a debate besides just an easy debate format. Mary's mentioned the names of some that we'll go into, and hopefully you'll find that beneficial.